from the Rexworth Estates near Castle Rexworth. I bid you good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and whenever you are. My name is Rexworth, Lord Rexworth, and I welcome you to I guess you could call this a holiday special of sorts. Part Christmas special, part New Year's special. Past few weeks, in an effort to build up some content for the YouTube channel, been doing a lot of video reacts, haven't really gotten to any sort of gameplay of any sort. And, well, it's going to remain much the same for this one, except I had an idea early in the week. I thought, you know what, at least for one time this year, we open up the forum in the form of a Discord VC, and I let some members of the community come in, and we all just sort of react to content together. Sort of a end-of-year special where we all just sort of gather together as friends and we vibe. We vibe together. And that's just what we do for a couple of hours. You know, we find some fun videos, no politics, no news, nothing too serious, just things that are fun and cool, maybe some funny things too, that we can all shed a laugh about. But yeah, we just have some fun and vibe together. And that's how we close the year out. Because in just a few days, we will be ringing in the new year. 2026 will be here. And, yeah, we'll have a whole new set of challenges to face in the new year. And another 12 months to face before we're back here doing the same thing again. But anyways, this is something not just for me, but also for you, the community. A way to make you all even more part of the program, part of the goings-on, and part of the fun, but also a way to show my appreciation for giving me the attention that you have, for being here, for supporting me. We bring up the lights in the theater, and we also light up the steps to the main stage. And I extend a hand of invitation to all of you who are interested to come up here and be a part of things and have some fun with me. Something a bit light-hearted to close out the year. So that's what we're going to do. It's going to be all part of the Castle Rexworth Discord, which we're going to hop into Stream VC. There we go. Now we're in Stream VC. You probably heard the sound of me dropping in there. So yeah, those of you who are members of the community, who are part of the Castle Rexworth Discord, please feel free to hop into Stream VC. We've got room for 7 more people. As much as I would love to have everybody in here at one time, that can get a bit chaotic, so figured it best to sort of keep this as a small gathering. So you're free to come and go as you like throughout the program. We'll be here for at least a few hours. So if you need to dash off in the middle of things, that's perfectly fine. It'll free up space for someone else to jump in if they like. But yeah, feel free to jump in at any time, and just, yeah, mind your P's and Q's, be respectful, and just remember that we are on stream, so absolutely positively do not do or say anything that would be a violation of TOS, either on Discord or on YouTube, Twitch, or Kick, because I won't hesitate to kick you out. Those are the rules there, and those are the rules here. So if we can just have that sort of understanding, we can all have some fun times. But yeah, feel free to jump in, and we'll get on it. Greetings, sir. Hope all is well. Hello, Damien and Anglo. Hello, hello. Are you sure you're prepared to give the server that kind of power? Well, it is still a benevolent dictatorship in the end. As I said, I can still decide who stays and who goes. So we'll leave it at that. Let's switch over to our React window. Apologies in advance if I do sound a bit stuffed up, chat, because I am. I'm still getting over some allergies, or I think yet another cold of some kind. I think too many rapid changes in atmosphere as I do travel for my work. And yeah, it's been unseasonably warm in many parts of America over Christmas, and I think I just breathed in something nasty, and it just got a bit stuck there, and has been bothering me ever since. But soldiering on as best I can. Anyways, I've got a lot here. Having you all here with me would probably help me to clean out a lot of these tabs. So let's turn the music down just a little bit. And let's find... There we are. Then we'll unmute the browser audio. Let me make sure that I've got Discord unmuted. There we go. And then we've also got that. And then trying to move Caster Labs up just a touch. And then we've also got set the Foogies next to me. But yes, by the way, chat, those of you who do decide to jump into the VC, you will be displayed in the form of either some sort of chosen Foogie avatar, or just your Discord PFP. So, make sure that whatever you want on screen is set beforehand, either through the Foogie Tech website, or change your PFP. Anyways, let's get started. I've got a metric fuck ton of travel videos, and some places... oh, we've also got a couple of other things here. I've got some car videos. I've also got some... somewhere in here. I do have some style videos. Oh yes, here's one I've been wanting to get to for a while. Okay, well let's set this up properly first, chat. Now, for some of you, or most of you, maybe even all of you, we've just got done with Christmas, and some of you may have gotten some money for Christmas from a friend, perhaps from a parent, maybe a gran, and you're saying to yourself, or to me, in an imaginary scenario, "Your lordship, I just got, $50. We'll say you got $50 for Christmas. Gift from the gran. God bless her, she dipped into savings or whatever, and, gave me $50, and I really feel like splurging this year and spoiling myself, even though, $50 in this economy, given the rate of inflation and everything, doesn't really go very far. But to that, I would say, well, it goes farther than you think. But you might be wondering, what should I get with $50? Well, that is something. You could buy yourself a watch. In fact, there's a really nice Casio that I think you'll like. Let's have a look. This is the $50 Casio that put the Swiss to shame.
Watches become iconic for different reasons, but interestingly enough, it's rarely about innovation. Some of the most important watches, technically speaking, are somewhat forgotten. If you asked watch enthusiasts to name Seiko's most iconic or greatest watches, few would name the Astron, but it's probably the most important watch ever.
It really is, because this was the first commercially available quartz wristwatch. And it seems hard to believe, but back then, this was the late 1960s when this was released, this was actually considered a luxury item. Quartz watches started out being far more expensive than mechanical watches, by orders of magnitude of, in the thousands of dollars, thousands of pounds more, because they were the most accurate, but also there was a lot of expenses to recoup from R&D. But this was the first commercially available quartz wristwatch, luxury item, super expensive, even back in the late 60s, probably cost some people as much as, well, even more than a Rolex at the time. For some people, it could have been several months' wages. But I've actually seen this at the Seiko Museum in Japan. Beautiful watch. They showed it there. Let's back up the tape here. Yeah, here we are. This is actually a reproduction that they did not too long ago. I believe it was in 2019 that they did it for the 50th anniversary of the original Quartz Astron. They came up with the Seiko Astron GPS, which was faithful reproduction, or mostly faithful reproduction, except adding in a GPS chip to set the time automatically. I've actually got one of these, not this specific model, but I do have an Astron GPS. And it's a fairly bulky watch, but it's also incredibly cool. The way they, the type of tech that they managed to pack in there. And, you know, literally as long as you have a clear view of the sky, it will set the time every 24 hours. And I think it only loses like a second or a half a second every century or so. A super accurate watch, really cool. If you've come into an inheritance or something like that, maybe look at a Seiko Astron. But anyways, let's keep going.
Few would name the Astron, but it's probably the most important watch ever, period. No, they would talk about the SKX and the Turtle and the 62 Moss and Sarb and Marine Master. You know, Rolex's
Fantastic
most iconic watches from the Submariner to the Daytona to the Explorer, Omega Speedmaster. These watches have a kind of status mostly as the product of great marketing. And you know, that's okay. That's just the nature of this industry. Often it's the people who choose to wear certain watches, from Steve McQueen rocking the Hanhart 417 or Tag Heuer Monaco to
Steve McQueen had some really cool watches. He was not only a really cool sort of chap, he had excellent taste in fashion and watches.
Paul Newman's Daytona. But sometimes a watch comes along that's just so perfectly timed and perfectly executed, packaged in a certain way, and just nailing the fundamentals so well that people just keep buying it. That's the case.
That footage that you just saw, chat, of a Casio watch being hit with a hockey stick by hockey players, that was a real field test that they did of the original Casio G-Shocks. That was a real test that they did in order to ensure that the watch actually was as tough as they were trying to make it. It survived being thrashed about on an ice rink by a bunch of hockey players, and it just kept on going. It was truly one of the first invincible sort of watches.
With the watch we're looking at today, the legendary Casio Duro. Now, I think I know you guys. If you're watching this Casio video and you're anything like me, you're always down to get a watch for cheap. I've officially launched my own Joma Shop affiliate page that you guys can check out by clicking the link in the description below.
That's a good channel,
Bots. Some of my favorite watches of all different price points, or you can just look around the site. They have pretty much everything. Whether you're hunting for a budget Casio or a mid-tier Seiko, or you just want to see what kind of trouble you can get yourself into, hit the link and poke around. You might find your next daily wearer at a price that you just can't resist. All right, enough of that. Let's jump back into the video. The turn of the most recent century was an interesting time for watchmakers. The Swiss had clawed their way back to relevance as luxury mechanical watches were finally selling well again. Seiko and Casio and Timex, of course, dominated the affordable watch segment, but Casio spent much of the 2000s rapidly growing its business into new markets, things like digital cameras and instruments, and even early smart devices like the Cassiopeia. On the watch side, the G-Shock had grown into a full-on lifestyle brand. They'd made their iconic affordable models more available than ever, and you know,
I mean, honestly, it is the best money you will ever spend on a watch, is getting a Casio G-Shock. Because it will last forever and ever, and it will absolutely take a beating, but keep on going.
Casio was still innovating. Watches like the Wave Scepter, for example, pushed radio sync technology really into the mainstream. But it had been a bit since Casio had released an all-new, industry-altering watch, and so as the 2010s rolled around, it was time for something new, but something very different from the watches that Casio had been known for. At this time, affordable dive watch was almost synonymous with Seiko. The entire entry-level dive watch landscape was dominated by Seiko. The SKX era was at its peak with the 007 and 009.
Absolute fantastic classic watches. They've since stopped making them under the standard Seiko brand, and they've moved them over to Seiko 5. If you can find one of these in good nick, get it. Because these particular ones, these older ones that were still sold under the Seiko brand, these are the ones to own. The current line of SKX, not bad, but they have cut some corners, like replacing sapphire glass with mineral crystal, few other things.
Selling literally in droves, and even the smaller little brother Submariner homages selling in certain markets. Micro brands hadn't blown up yet at this point, and so Casio had an in. What if they could make a dive watch that had everything? You know, a stylish classic design, that timeless dive watch silhouette, stainless steel, incredibly legible, professional level specs, but above all else, make it available in an ultra affordable package. Now, this wouldn't be Casio's first dive watch. Before the Duro ever existed, Casio already had a surprisingly deep history with dive-oriented watches, just not typically in this classic analog form. In the 1980s, Casio created
They didn't look like your typical dive watches.
Lineup of digital divers known collectively as the Marlin watches, named for their small Marlin logo printed on the dials. These were early water-resistant digital tool watches built for swimming, snorkeling, and also in many cases full professional diving. These were true digital dive watches. They had depth meters, dive timers, log functions, and full 200-meter water resistance, long before most affordable brands were doing anything comparable. The Marlin series earned a cult following for giving everyday buyers a reliable, rugged dive companion at a time when this category was still dominated by far more expensive mechanical brands.
And this sort of waterproofing was still a relatively recent phenomenon, especially with the digital watch. A lot of the earlier iterations of digital watches they might have been splash proof if you were lucky, but the idea of 100 meters or 200 meters of water resistance on a digital watch, practically unthinkable for a long time.
Throughout the 90s and 2000s, Casio kept the Marlin logo alive across multiple various water sports models,
These
sometimes
really look
digital,
cool.
sometimes analog, like the lesser-known MD709, but never in a package that was universally appealing. Despite its new form, it was time to put that Marlin logo on a new kind of watch. Now, the watch in question's release would come in the year 2011 under the model name MDV106, or as it's more well known, the Duro. When Casio released the MDV106, it wasn't presented as this major product launch or some sort of groundbreaking innovation, or even as part of a big marketing campaign. In typical Casio fashion, it just kind of showed up quietly. But this unassuming diver would go on to become one of the most recognizable, affordable tool watches of its era, and one of
talk about underselling. It looks fantastic, and it really deserved a lot more pomp and circumstance than it got.
the most successful mechanical style analog watches that Casio ever produced. Casio had made plenty of dive watches, but never quite like this, at least not in this form. The rather large 44mm case in stainless steel was perhaps the standout feature. This didn't look like a Casio, and it sure didn't feel or look like a $50 watch. Brushed lugs, polished case
It really
sides.
doesn't. I've actually seen it in the metal, in person, and an old friend of mine from my days in corporate law, he actually was just starting out at the time, and yeah, he had himself one of these Marlin Duros. I think he even had the rubber strap too. And man, I thought it looked cool even back then. And you'd never know, it only cost him $50.
A classic round profile with really no embellishments or anything crazy. 200 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown and caseback. solid, reliable, but just deliberately simple. On top of this, the watch featured a
Very
unidirectional
understated.
120-click bezel made in aluminum with large timing hashes, a clear high-contrast pip at 12, chunky teeth for easy grip, and a nice, satisfying, dare I say luxurious clicky bezel. A gloss black dial with large white indices filled with lume, sword-style hands, and a framed date window at 3, and that Marlin logo at 6, a detail that would become beloved, but actually would
That's
disappear
everything you
from
need, nothing
certain
you
Duro
don't.
models later. The dial is all about simplicity and legibility. It's the same design logic found on ISO divers, even though the Duro itself was not ISO certified. Now, it was,
It
of
could be,
course, a
though.
budget watch. You can't make a $50 watch have everything, so it had a mineral crystal, which is inexpensive but durable enough
That's
for daily
surprising.
wear, an accurate but cheap Casio quartz movement, though in many ways this is the heart of the Duro's appeal. It's got that quartz simplicity and toughness but analog looks. Originally sold on a simple black resin strap, though also on a bracelet today, but for many the real fun is going aftermarket when it comes to straps. Casio
Yes.
intentionally kept the strap basic to keep costs down, and all of this with a launch price of $50. It was too good to resist for watch.
I believe the lug width at the top and bottom of the watch is 20 millimeters, which in watch parlance, that would make it what's known as a strap monster, which means there is just a near unlimited plethora of 20 millimeter watch straps out there that you can swap out with the rubber band that this comes with, and you can customize it to your liking. And a lot of people do.
Collectors of really all kinds, including this guy, Bill Gates, who actually helped popularize the Duro by wearing it all the time. At this time, a true budget
We'll
watch
try not to
that
hold
was
that
in this
against Casio.
$50 range, well, they weren't typically like the Duro. You could get something like a World Timer from Casio or a Timex Easy Reader, and other than that, it was mostly gas station watches in this price point. Just garbage, really. Disposable, flimsy fashion pieces, chrome-plated cases, hollow-feeling buttons, rattly bezels. If
7 freely given gift 7, thank you for the follow. Hopefully you're not here to spam chat like last person. We're watching you.
anything in this price point even had a bezel, and water resistance ratings that just were not reliable. Cheap watches at this time did work for telling the time and not much else, and they certainly weren't built to last. What you absolutely could not get for $50 was a real diver style watch. Stainless steel, screw down crown, 200 meters of water resistance, a proper rotating bezel, legibility, and style that rivaled watches literally 100 times the price. The Duro wasn't just another affordable watch, it was something unheard of in this bracket. And that's exactly why it became so popular and so legendary. I also
They
think it's
undercut the
fair to say
market.
that the rise of the go anywhere, do anything watch, and also just the beater watch in general, helped to make the Duro a hit. For much of watch history, your watch was just your watch. If you had the money and desire to buy something special and even expensive, that was just your watch. And if you decided to go fly a plane or work on a car, that was still the watch you wore, and you just fixed it if you broke it. There wasn't really this concept of owning really nice luxury watches and then also having significantly cheaper versions of said watch, if that makes sense. There wasn't the Moon Swatch for Speedmaster owners, or loads of Submariner and Explorer homages for Rolex people. I'm not saying it wasn't a thing at all, it just wasn't like it is today. And by the
Yeah, how can I put this? We don't really know how good we have it now compared to back then. Back then you were lucky if you had even the one watch. These days we're spoiled for choice, so much so that it's become almost like a hobby collecting watches.
time the Duro came around, it was able to function for many as a kind of beater Submariner or 50 Fathoms for people who, didn't want to ruin those watches or just couldn't afford those watches. It was a true Gada watch. And also, in many ways, the Duro was a fusion of a few different ideals that were already present at Casio.
Gada
It
meaning
really
go anywhere,
brought
do
together
anything.
the more professional, luxury aesthetic of, say, the Edifice collection with the tool nature of their digital watches. And the idea to do this for a dive watch was just so brilliant from Casio.
I love the digital watches that Casio has been able to come up with. I've got a customized Casio Royale that I tend to take with me for work just because it's one of the most versatile and definitely a watch I feel comfortable wearing in, rough work situations that it, yeah, it just, and it looks so damn cool. And it's a world timer too. I can track like 4 different time zones with just the press of a button. There's something about that, even today, is just so cool.
The dive watch does sit as kind of the ultimate fusion of luxury and tool. Casio has now sold millions of these watches, and they can be
I
had
see what he
for
did there.
a little more than their original price tag. It's also worth noting that the Duro really became the ultimate dive watch for many actual divers, like professional divers. Similar to professional anything, whether it's rock climbing or hunting, it's demanding and often hard on gear. Using a luxury dive
True.
watch for diving was already at this point a somewhat ridiculous idea.
Ridiculous today. Back then, what we now know as luxury watches, they were built for this sort of environment here that we see on screen. I mean, a Rolex Submariner was built to take diving. It was the sort of watch that divers would buy and they would wear when they're diving. And I mean, that was just their watch. Airline pilots would buy a Rolex GMT Master, and that's how they would keep track between 2 different time zones that they were traveling to for international flights. It was made most famous with Pan Am pilots who were on the original 707s that would fly from New York to London, the first transatlantic flight route. It was specifically built for those pilots so they could have something to track not only time in New York, but also time in London, which could often be about a 5 or 6 hour time difference.
But the options for those wanting a nice, classic looking but affordable and accurate, durable dive watch was limited. Like we said, Seiko was really the go-to option for many, but not in this $50 price bracket. A Seiko Tuna Professional or Citizen ProMaster Aqualand would run you more like $300-400. And sure, you'd be getting more watch, but for $50,
Nowadays, they cost a lot more than that. There are some Seikos which, if you can imagine, they cost about $1,000, some of them as much as $2,000. Seikos are starting to get up there in price. I mean, we already knew that Grand Seikos were going to be pretty expensive, but even regular Seikos are starting to become quite the luxury item. And a lot of it can be due to the collector's market, but much of it also due to inflation.
this thing was just a steal, and so professional divers bought it and used it. It was tough, it was reliable, legible, water ready, and cheap enough that if you smashed it on something like, I don't know, coral, whatever divers break their watches on, gear probably,
Could be anything.
or say you just lost it, you just bought another one. To many divers, it wasn't a fashion watch. It was just simply the most practical tool for the job,
A literal
for the
tool
cheapest
watch.
amount. The popularity of the original Duro meant that Casio would eventually turn it into a kind of line or series rather than just a one-off watch. The
They even gave it a Gilt dial, a Batman dial, and a Pepsi dial.
core MDV 106 stayed the same big 44mm, 200-meter, screw-down crown, kind of internet's favorite $50 diver, but Casio quietly spun it into a mini line of colorways: black bezel, blue bezel, green bezel, Batman, Pepsi, even a gold tone bezel version, all sharing
This right here on the right, chat, this is what's known as a Batman dial, the blue and the black, reference to the original color scheme of Batman in DC Comics. And this right here is what's known as a Pepsi dial, because it's got the red and the blue, very reminiscent to what you would find with the logo and the can of Pepsi.
the same basic case and layout. Later, under the MDV 107 designation, they refreshed the watch again.
Maybe dealing with some crazy winds, so maybe a bit away. That's all right. Welcome in, Rosso.
New colors and small tweaks, most notably losing the little fish logo on the dial while keeping the same fundamental specs of this watch. But the weirdest and perhaps most controversial evolution was the so-called mini Duro, the MDV-10. On paper, Casio finally did what everybody had been begging for, a smaller Duro, because it is such a big watch, listed at around 38 to 39 millimeters, and aimed at people who thought that the original wore a little bit big. In practice, though, reviewers who got their hands on one of these found that it actually measures closer to 36 millimeters across the case, with a lug-to-lug of around 41.7 millimeters, and crucially, a tiny 16 millimeter lug width. That 16 millimeter bracelet tapers down to just 14 millimeters at the clasp, which multiple reviewers have called cartoonishly small for what's supposed to be still a men's dive watch, but it's more like a kid's watch really, and it makes aftermarket strap options a pain, which really misses the whole
Maybe
point
more fitting
of the
for
Duro.
a woman.
On top of that, the MDV-10 drops to 50 meters of water resistance, swaps the screw-down case back and crown for a snapback and regular crown, and uses a lighter 60-click bezel, all of which makes it feel less like, a smaller version of the original Colt, tool diver that the Duro is, and more like just a cheap, crappy watch. Now, because Casio priced this watch so low, it ended up becoming one of the most heavily modded watches in the community. This watch is everywhere on Instagram and on social media, and it really is a huge part of modding culture. One of the most common upgrades, of course, is the crystal. Companies like Long Island Watch sell drop-in flat sapphire replacements specifically for the Duro with AR coating, helping this watch kind of become just a more serious tool watch.
Good.
But then it also gets pretty wild. There are aftermarket bezel inserts all over Amazon and eBay, including ceramic and different colorways. There are YouTube tutorials walking through how to swap these things, and it really is a perfect platform for creativity.
Got a Jubilee
now, I
band
wanted
on
to
it.
get my hands on this watch, so I jumped on Amazon and I picked up a nice Pepsi version on a steel bracelet for about 70 bucks. Not too bad. It arrived literally the next day, and I've got to say, this is a strange experience for a Casio guy. I've had a few Casios, and this is just a different kind of watch from what I'm used to from Casio. It has that luxury heft, not something you associate with Casio. Of course, at this price point, you don't get any sort of luxury unboxing experience, which I wouldn't expect that. But aside from that, this dive watch, it really is everything people say. Honestly, the only thing I don't love is
even
the size.
Kids love it.
44 millimeters is just too big for most
That
wrists
is big.
and bigger than my liking. I have a 7.5-inch wrist, and I can wear it, sure. And maybe if I was actually diving, this is the kind of watch that I would want. You don't really want a tiny little dive watch. A big part of visibility comes down to size, really. And the visibility is great on this, but as someone who
usually something between 38 and 40 millimeters, it really hits that sweet spot for a lot of people.
Wants to wear a dive watch more as just an everyday piece, I would struggle to pick this over a 40 millimeter dive watch. That would be fantastic. If this watch was about 40 millimeters, it would be perfect. Still, it is really quality feeling, and I do think that developing and producing watches like the Duro really did help Casio prepare to make their more premium edifice mechanical watches that they're making now. But, that's another story for another video. I would love to hear from you guys. What do you guys think of the Duro? Do you think it's one of Casio's greatest watches? Maybe you've owned one. Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
All right. That's Watch Stories. We'll give that a subscribe, and we'll give that a like, and we'll copy the link, and we'll post it in the chat. That's a good one.